was the reaction of David and Absalom to Amnon's sin against Tamar? This is the question that we seek to answer today as we continue our verse-by-verse study of the book of 2 Samuel on walking through the Bible. Before beginning, I feel it is my duty as a preacher of the gospel to issue a warning to parents who might be listening with young children that this lesson deals with the issue of incest and a sexual assault. And therefore, I ask you to consider the maturity of your children before continuing. What we're going to be discussing is not a topic, uncomfortable as it may be, that those who are mature should skip in our walk through the Bible, for we can learn some valuable lessons about sin from it, and it is necessary to examine in order to fully understand much of the next section of the book of 2 Samuel. Let it be known, though, that in the discussion of this topic, we will not be crude or graphic, but will approach it delicately and appropriately as we do with any sensitive topic that the Bible talks about. So, today then, we're going to be discussing 2 Samuel chapter 13, verses 15 to 22. But before we do that, let's read the passage. If you have a Bible with you, you can turn to 2 Samuel 13, verse 15. If you don't have a Bible, don't worry. Just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So 2 Samuel chapter 13, beginning at verse 15. Then Amnon hated her exceedingly, so that the hatred with which he hated her was greater than the love with which he had loved her. And Amnon said to her, "Arise, be gone." She said to him, "No, indeed, this evil of sending me away is worse than the other that you did to me." But he would not listen to her. Then he called his servant who attended him and said, "Here, put this woman out, away from me, and bolt the door behind her." Now she had on a robe of many colors, for the king's virgin daughters wore such apparel. And his servant put her out and bolted the door behind her. Then Tamar put ashes on her head, and tore her robe of many colors that was on her, and laid her hand on her head, and went away crying bitterly. And Absalom her brother said to her, "Has Amnon your brother been with you? But now hold your peace, my sister. He is your brother. Do not take this thing to heart." So Tamar remained desolate in her brother Absalom's house. But when King David heard of all these things, he was very angry. And Absalom spoke to his brother Amnon neither good nor evil, for Absalom hated Amnon because he had forced his sister Tamar. In our last lesson, we discussed the beginning of the dysfunction of David's family, a direct result of his multiple marriages, which went against God's teaching in Deuteronomy 17:17, and his sin with Bathsheba in 2 Samuel 11. What occurred was that Amnon claimed to be in love with his half-sister Tamar. In truth, Amnon was not in love with Tamar. He was in lust with her. Tamar was beautiful, and she was a virgin, but she was Amnon's half-sister, and thus any sexual feelings that he may have had for her were deviant. However, that didn't stop Amnon from acting on them, for when he had his sister baking for him because he was supposedly sick, and when they were alone, he forced himself upon his sister against her will and raped her. Tamar was completely innocent in this affair, for she did not consent to the sexual encounter in any way. Amnon did so because he could not control his lust for her, thinking it was love. And if the rape wasn't bad enough, after the event was over, verse 14 says that Amnon hated Tamar, a hate that was stronger than the supposed love with which he loved her. Obviously, the sex was not what Amnon thought it would be, and so after violating his sister and bringing shame upon her and upon himself, he despised her and told her to leave him. Tamar told Amnon that sending her away would be a greater evil than he had already done to her. How so? Because by sending her away, it would make it seem that she was the guilty party in the matter, and that Amnon was the victim of a woman's enticements. So not only was Tamar not a virgin, she would be seen as a whore too, a stain on her character that would be near impossible to erase. Again, Amnon wouldn't listen, and called for his servants to send her away and bolt the door behind them. What a despicable man Amnon was, but he teaches us the evils of sin. For before we commit sin, it often looks desirable, but in the end, it always brings despair and ruin. Having been utterly humbled and humiliated, Tamar runs away in tears, tearing her robe of many colors that would have signified that she was the daughter of the king. She covered her head in ashes, a sign of mourning, and wept bitterly. Absalom, her brother, saw her and surmised what had happened. That Absalom knew shows us that Amnon did not hide his feelings for Tamar very well, though I'm sure Absalom didn't believe he would behave in this way. Trying to comfort his sister, he tells Tamar to hold her peace, to be patient. Why? For they must first see what David, their father, and the king of Israel would do. Would he avenge Tamar and execute proper judgment, which in this case would have been death for Amnon according to Leviticus 20:17? If he would, then at least her name would have been restored. However, unbeknownst to Tamar, if David didn't act, Absalom would, though that part he kept a secret from everyone. Now what did David do? Well, he got angry with Amnon, but the text doesn't say he did anything other than that, and we know he didn't have Amnon executed. Why would David not act? Well, for one, he had committed adultery with Bathsheba and was deserving of death. How then could he exact a penalty which he himself deserved? This was another way that David's sin affected his rule. He could not always make the righteous judgment concerning sin because of what he had done. But there is another reason that could be at play here too. Amnon is David's oldest son, and as such would have seen David's example, a bad example in this way, firsthand. Perhaps David couldn't bring himself to execute his son because he himself felt partly responsible too. This inaction, though, did nothing to help his daughter Tamar, but that is the way David chose to act here. And so David's inaction would lead Absalom to act, a decision that would not only have consequences for Amnon, but for Absalom and David as well. Again, the result of David's sin with Bathsheba, as told to David by God. We hope you'll return for that discussion, the Lord willing, in the next lesson. With that, our time is up for today. The Lord willing, we hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of 2 Samuel chapter 13, verses 23 to 33, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time. Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends, so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.